So greetings, this is Rafael Ruiz of New York Kinokuniya bookstores. We are speaking today with author Nick Jones. Nick Jones was born in Stratford-upon-Avon, Warwickshire, and now lives in Cotswolds, England. In a previous life, he ran his own media company and was a second Dan black belt in karate. These days, he can be found in his writing room, working on his latest mind-bending ideas, surrounded by notes and scribbling on a large whiteboard. He loves movies, kindness, gin, and vinyl. How are you today, Nick?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks, Raphael. I probably should have warned you how to say Warwickshire, but everyone's going to struggle with that one.
So your new book is titled And Then She Vanished, published by Blackstone Audio. And the main character in your novel, and indeed a subsequent series based on him, is Joseph Bridgeman. Can you tell us a little bit about him?
Yeah, so I'll sort of start where we join him in the novel. So Joe's in his early 30s, and his family's been torn apart. So he's a pretty broken guy at the start of the novel. He's got an antiques business, which is kind of falling into ruin, and he's really suffering. And it's basically because he's tortured by the disappearance of his little sister. So he's got insomnia, is sort of ruining his life. And I should probably mention at that point, there's also some comedy in there. So it sounds horrendous at the beginning, but that's the kind of idea, is to start him out at rock bottom. So yeah, he's basically suffering from a lot of loss and regret, and he's kind of basically gone right inside his shell. That's kind of how we start the novel.
So what would you say the premise for And Then She Vanished is, if you would summarize it?
Sure, yeah. So as I said, it's about a man called Joe who's haunted by the disappearance of his little sister Amy, who vanished from a fairground in 1997. So Joe's life has fallen apart, and he really blames himself for what's happened, and he's suffering with terrible insomnia. I've suffered with that before myself, and you'll turn to anything. So he turns to hypnosis, and he accidentally discovers a latent ability to time travel.
Wow.
So the only problem is, the further back in time that he goes, the less time he gets to stay in the past. So Joe's got to figure out somehow how to make it all the way back to 1997 to solve the mystery and save his sister.
Wow. So being that time travel is a critical feature of the storyline, do you find any challenges to working with time travel? Do you find anything exciting in creating the timeline?
Yeah, I mean, time travel's obviously an interesting one. I think it's impossible to write a time travel story without any paradoxes. I think that's the first thing I just did. I just accepted that. It's like time travel readers they heavily scrutinize your work. So I knew straight away, look, this is going to be, I wanted to come up with my own interesting take on it. There's been some great movies and great novels about time travel. So what I think what I did to start with, I just wanted to set up the rules. I think if you can understand the rules of your world, and I took that pretty seriously. I kind of created these rules. I bench tested them, not literally, obviously, but I really thought about what would happen if I can't actually time travel. But yeah, I thought what would happen if the characters, could I play around with them? And I took those rules pretty, seriously. Then I think you can create peril and restrictions within those rules, and then see if you can maybe even break them. So I think the core idea, I think once I'd come up with the core idea of what I described as the elastic band theory. So in the book, we call it the elastic band theory. And that's this idea of stretching. So the further back he goes, it's harder and harder, and it's going to throw him back quickly. And that's actually a logarithmic curve, apparently. So I got a friend of mine who's a mathematician and just all-round brain box, and he basically described to me this logarithmic curve, and he was actually able to create an Excel spreadsheet for me where I could plug in, if Joe starts here and goes here, how long will he stay and when will he come back? So it got very technical, which is not necessarily my strong point, but I ended up kind of loving it. So I think it presents loads of challenges, but I'm an optimist, so I think those challenges are opportunities, I guess, to have some fun with the kind of fiction and the character and see where you can throw him.
That actually sounds really fast, especially your spreadsheet idea.
Yeah, it was cool. I mean, it was helpful. I mean, for a while I was kind of, for a while I was having to guess and think, okay, I think it's going to be like, he's gone back 10 years. So I'm figuring, maybe that's going to be like a day. And then I was trying to work it out that way. But as soon as we actually got this logarithmic curve, and the interesting thing with a logarithmic curve is it makes sense for a while, but then it flattens out at the bottom. So once you get so far back, the differences are going to be less in terms of, it's not going to be an hour and then it's going to be half an hour. It's going to be, seconds difference.
Right.
So it's a real challenge for him to figure out how to beat time. I mean, that's the idea, isn't it?
So I know you just said that a lot of time travel readers can very scrutinize time travel works. So when you were starting, and do you normally consider potential readers before you start writing the piece, or do you just work on the project and then fill it in later? Like, how was your writing process in those regards like then?
That's an interesting question. Yeah. I mean, I'm one of those authors. I mean, I think a lot of people say, oh, I write for me.
Right.
I don't care what happens to it. And, even if it never got published, I'm not that guy. So I do write for me. I mean, I enjoy writing, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't be doing this.
Right.
But I absolutely think about the reader all the way through the process. So, I like to try and be ingenious and to, surprise the readers and that kind of thing. But I think that comes from the very beginning of the process for me. So I think when you set out to write a time travel story, there are certain expectations around that. The most basic one would be there's going to be time travel. The second one might be there's going to be trouble. There's going to be, can you change it? Should you change it? There's all these sort of they're tropes. They're tropes that you expect from a good time travel story. Some people would say that's restrictive. I actually think, look, you're making a promise at the start. I'm going to tell you a really entertaining, fun time travel story. And you're going to expect some paradoxes. You're going to say, oh, maybe he's going to meet himself. Maybe this is going to happen. Maybe blah, he's going to, So I think there's certain expectations, and therefore I think you make a promise with the reader. So yeah, I would think about the reader all the way through. And I did a lot of beta testing. I actually originally released it in episodes, so I was getting a lot of feedback as I went through and stuff like that. So no, I'm a big believer in I want readers to love it and be happy. I want as many people as possible to read it. So I start with them, really.
That's, I think, the best way to start, really. So you've also had a career including running your own media company, and you're also an accomplished martial artist. Have your life experience influenced or made their way into your writing?
Yeah, both of those things. I think they're an interesting kind of mix, and I think if I maybe talk about the sort of agency background first. So I worked for a sort of advertising marketing agency. I was one of the directors of the company, and I think it's funny actually because you always kind of want what you haven't got, don't you? So when I was running the company, all I could dream about was kind of solitude, just to write novels. And now I've got solitude, and all I can dream about is hanging out with people, drinking coffee and talking rubbish, So, well, not that that's what I did as a company. Well, I did a bit. But anyway, you get the idea. But I think agency life, it was a kind of video. We made videos and apps, and we had marketing and all that kind of stuff. And I was the kind of creative side of the business, and I was often described as the kind of glue. So I had one foot in the kind of agency, the internal side, and I also had one foot in with the client. And I think that helped me to sort of think from both sides. So the agency would come up with these super creative, crazy ideas. Eventually we had to figure out what we were actually going to make, and I had to negotiate with clients to make sure that we were still on track. And to bring it back to your question, I think when I switched to being a full-time author, the ability to wear all those different hats and to exist in a sort of creative side of my life, but also the nitty-gritty getting stuff done side, it's actually quite a good skill to have, I think, because if you get too worried and get into the weeds and into the nitty-gritty of the novel writing, it can get very overwhelming. But equally, you've got to be able to have ideas without feeling the weight of all of that pressure of how am I actually going to make this work. So I think switching hats is what I definitely took from agency side, if that sort of answers your question. And I think, yeah, the other side of it was the martial arts. So,
Right.
you know, look, it's been a while. So, you know, Rusty doesn't really encapsulate it, but I think at one point I was extremely dedicated to that. And I think, you know, working your way up towards a black belt, the karate side of it for me, yes, it was a physical form, but I think, as I'm sure a lot of people tell you who are into martial arts, if it's a good martial arts, it's not just the physical, it's the mental and the spiritual side of it. And I think the practice. So this idea of constant practice, you know, I used to train 3 or 4 times a week, and I think that kind of dedication to a goal, a long goal. Anyone who, you know, I think if you're a marathon runner or whatever it might be, it's the training, the amount of discipline it takes to stick to something, see it through, even through injuries or tough times or doubts or all that kind of stuff. I think that that kind of determination to see a project through to the end is obviously massively helps when you're looking at writing a novel, because it can feel, to mix metaphors all over the place, you know, that's a tough mountain to climb, and it takes a lot of discipline. So yeah, I think from an agency side, it was switching hats and just being all these different types of characters. And I think from the martial arts side, definitely an ability to see it through, even if it's tough. And writing a novel, there's a lot of pleasure, but it can be tough to finish, you know, to actually get to the end.
I can only imagine, especially which I'm sure during the writing process, there's a lot of chance for self-doubt. And
plenty.
Your biggest critique in the whole form.
Yeah. And I think, you know, I think also taking a few knockbacks, you know, when you get some bad reviews, or you're really struggling. I mean, I don't particularly get writer's block because I'm a bit of a planner. Well, I'm a bit of a planner. I'm a planner. So writer's block isn't the question, the thing, but often it can feel, you know, just wanting to, keep that momentum.
Are there any themes you find important that apply to most or even all of your books? Or do they tend to be very different depending on the current project?
Yeah. I mean, I think Stephen King said this, so I'm going to quote him really badly now, but he describes theme as something that emerges from the book. You don't necessarily decide, I'm going to write a book with this theme. You know, you kind of, I think theme is something that you, a bit like you're sculpting something, you know, it's a massive piece of stone. Are you sculpting a figure, or are you revealing that figure? And I think you're revealing it. Excuse me a second, let me just turn off my phone. So I think you're revealing that theme from the story. So when I first set out, I wanted to write a story about someone who would do anything for family, who was determined, who wouldn't give up. I wanted to write a time travel story that questioned, if you can go back in time, you know, should you? Is that the right thing to do? What is it that shapes us? Is it the hard things? You know, most people in life would say, you know, that life is up and down, right? I mean, it's there's amazing days, and there's heartbreak days where you're howling at the walls, you know. So you sort of think, but sometimes those tough things shape us. So I think there were numerous themes kind of woven through the first book, and I think it was only when I finished that and began working on the follow-up to that book did I really start to understand the bigger themes. So I think there's almost a per book theme, an idea, and then I think there's also an overarching theme that seems to work throughout everything I've ever written. So to answer your question, yes, I think there is a theme. The theme throughout the sort of golden thread throughout everything seems to be healing. You know, wanting, I think, and at the moment we definitely need that. You know, I feel like the planet, politics, everything, there's a lot of healing that needs to happen at the moment. And I think when you're writing about time travel, maybe we could go back and we could fix some of that stuff.
Right.
Well, actually, I think the theme is more of a cautionary tale, because I hate to break it to everyone, but time travel isn't possible. As we know at the moment, it's not possible. So we're not going to be able to go back and fix this. So we need to start fixing it now. So I think that's the themes that have kind of emerged as I've gone through, is this idea of you know, we can't time travel, which is kind of weird when you think, you know, the books are about that. But does that make sense?
Right. No, that doesn't make sense. So do you have any books coming out in the near future, and can you tell us a little about them?
Yeah. So book 1 in the series, which is And Then She Vanished, that's out now. Book 2 in the Joseph Bridgeman series is coming out in June.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, that one's done. And then after that, I'm writing more. So for me at the moment, it's all about the Joseph Bridgeman series. I absolutely love writing them. And you know, with 2 in the bag, I'm just coming up to the finish on the 3rd book. I've been scratching my head on the kind of finale, and that one is set. So the 2nd book is set in kind of 1960s London. So the sort of swinging 60s. And there's kind of like some gangsters, and there's a murder that's got to be solved. So it's a kind of murder mystery. And then the 3rd book is 1873 in Paris, and there's an opera house fire. So very different. I like the idea of surprising and kind of mixing things up. So each book has got its own, you know, like in Friends, people say, oh, it's the one with blah. I'd like it to be that people say the book, oh, that's the one in the 60s, and that's the one where he goes to Paris. And so I've got this, and I've mapped out 7 books altogether. So I'm currently writing. I'm writing book 3. After that, I'll be straight into book 4, and then there's, yeah, like I said, I've got outlines for 7 books. It's something I would really love to see that through, because I think, you know, when you've got characters who you really start to inhabit, and they start to tell you what they want to do, and they start to do, you know, they're sort of growing. I think, as an author, you kind of really want, if you can, to see that through. I'd love to see the whole series through. We'll see how it goes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So for the foreseeable future, it's Joseph Bridgeman all the way for me. I've got other ideas bubbling away. I think it's good. I keep a sort of, I keep a book of the next novel, but at the moment I don't want to do anything but Joe Bridgeman. So that's what I'm working on.
So I can tell that you've already described yourself as someone that does a lot of outlines. And I know there's always this idea of the 2 types of authors, those who outline and those who discover as they go.
Yeah.
Are you a very strict outliner, or there's ever time when you're writing where something bubbles up new and kind of starts to steer you off course? Or are you very stick to the outline type of author?
Yeah. Every book seems to be different, if I'm honest. I'm absolutely a planner at heart. I wasn't when I started. And that led to a few dark days where you kind of think, well, you've written yourself into a complete corner. And I was in a mindset then of like, I'm wasting words, I'm wasting time, I'm wasting words. I want to stay more on track. And I think I envy writers who, you know, can just get a pot of coffee, open the laptop, and just blast through a book, and 3 months later out it comes. I mean, I envy them. And by the way, they're amazing books. So there's nothing wrong with that process. But you're absolutely right. There are 2 different types of authors. That I've never met anyone who doesn't fit into one of these camps. You've got the pantsters who just write from the seat of their pants, and then you've got the, you know, the planners. And I'm definitely in the planning side. I think, to answer your question though, I like to leave some room, and nothing ever goes according to plan, does it? Right. So I can plan the absolute hell out of it, and I can spend like a month just sketching out all my scenes, and I know the ending, I know everything that's going to happen. I'm like, this is going to be great. But then when you start writing it, things are going to come up, and also the first or even your second idea isn't necessarily always the best one. It's good to keep digging, get to idea 3, 4, 5, and then you kind of go, whoa, wait a minute, what about if? So I like to try and leave a bit of room. If possible. I think that's a nice thing. But no, I mean, overall, I want to be productive. I want to release books in a kind of timely fashion. And I think just for my mental health, I like to plan, because it just means that I never sit down in the morning and think, what am I going to write today? You know, what happens next? That just isn't me. I just don't do that. I sit down thinking, right, I left it here and I know exactly what I'm writing today. If that then goes wrong, that's okay. And I will just stop writing at that point. So I don't really discover it. I'll just stop writing, and I will plan it through, and I'll make sure I understand. And it usually comes down, it's always character. It always comes from character. If you can ask the character and say, why are you doing this? Why do you want to go there? Because I think sometimes you can fall into the bear trap of just wanting a certain thing to happen because it's going to be cool, or it's just that's the way the story's going. And if you really ask yourself, but hang on, there's 3 people here, why wouldn't they just stop them doing that? Why wouldn't they say, hang on, I'm not playing, you know? So I think it always comes back to character. If I don't know what I'm doing or something isn't working, something I've planned that it should be working, it's usually because I haven't thought about the characters enough.
That makes a lot of sense. So interesting, for people who buy the book in our store,
Yes,
it is coming with this patch.
it
and
is.
we are very curious to know what is the significance of it. If you can tell us, please.
They are extremely cool, aren't they? I was
Yes, they
very
really
pleased. I've got my own merchandise. I could only ever dream of this moment. Yeah, I was very, my publisher are fantastic, and they, I pitched this idea and I said, look, you know, it would be great to give, you know, fans something cool to go with the books. So I suggested the Vinnies Vinyl patch. So Vinny is one of the characters in the first book, and he actually goes through the series. So as soon as I started writing Vinny, I just realized what a gift he was. So Vinny is the kind of friend that I think everyone wishes they had. You know, he's optimistic and he's supportive, and he runs the local vinyl shop. And that's where the character Joe kind of finds solace and friendship and support from Vinny. And Vinnie's Vinyl is kind of like just a really cool old school kind of vinyl shop. And I thought it would be fun to give out a bit of merchandise around that, because I think he's such a fan favorite, you know, and he features heavily in the second book as well. So I think people are really pleased to hear that. So yeah, it's a bit of fun. So yeah, I think you've got hardbacks and the patches, right?
Yep, we
Great.
do.
Excellent.
So holding up your book, can you give us an unabashed pitch? Why should prospective readers pick it up?
Sure. So this is what I was saying earlier about the hats, isn't it? I have to go from author to put on the different hat and say, right, now it's a book. It's no longer my baby, it's a book now. Okay, here we go. I'll give it a go, okay?
Yeah.
So, And Then She Vanished is the first book in the Joseph Bridgeman series, a time travel mystery that blends action, adventure, comedy, and romance in a really entertaining and accessible way. There aren't any time machines. There's no complicated physics to try and work out. This is about real characters and the small stories that shape who we become. And it's got a twist that you will not see coming. So give it a try and find out why readers are saying they couldn't put it down.
Thank you so much. That was
How did I do?
That was great. I'm definitely picking up a copy today.
Are you? Are you going to read it?
Oh, absolutely.
That's good, man. I bet you say that to all the authors, don't you?
So finally, would you be willing to read us a passage from And Then She Vanished?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I was thinking the obvious one to read would be something like just go straight in and read the prologue, but we've kind of covered a lot of the setup of the book. So I thought it might be a bit more fun if I actually go in and read a little section. So if I just sort of give you a little bit of background about where we're at, because I'm going to dive right into the middle of the book, because it's just a little section that I was really pleased with, and it kind of sums up, I think, the style of the book as well. So if that's all right, I'll read from there. But if I just explain how we've got to this point. So Joe has discovered that through this latent ability, through hypnosis, that he can think his way back through time. But there are all these rules that he doesn't understand. So he's got a very old friend of his who he's not seen for a long time, and he goes to visit him. And Mark, his friend, is a physicist. So this is based on the friend that helped me with my Excel spreadsheet. And Mark is a physicist, and so Joe has to go to a physicist and basically tell him that he can time travel. So it's the kind of conversation between these two and trying to persuade somebody who's obviously extremely academic that, you know, you can time travel. So here we go. This is Joe visiting Mark. I know Mark. Once I start, he'll become a question machine, and I want to give him the answers he deserves. Also, now I'm here, I realize that every step on this journey needs to be a deliberate one. Each decision will either move me closer to saving Amy or further away. Coming here today was the right move. Now I just need to win him over and gain not only his wisdom, but his support. I believe he's the key to unlocking full understanding of my abilities. So what's this all about? Mark asks. You said it had something to do with Amy? It has everything to do with her. Okay then, he says, I'm listening. And so I begin to tell him. I get as far as hypnotherapy led to accidental time travel when he raises a hand and stops me, a deep frown etched into his forehead. Sorry, you mean you lost track of time and had some kind of episode? No, I mean I time traveled. Mark takes a sip of tea and nods calmly. You time traveled, he says slowly, with the cautious demeanor of a scientist listening to an interesting theory. You mean in your mind? I knew this would be harder than Vinny, because Mark's so utterly convinced that he understands how the world works. It isn't his fault, but he has an air of superiority. He looks as though he's deciding who to call on my behalf. I press on regardless, explaining that after the accidental jumps, I managed to do some specific and surprisingly controlled ones. Well, before the barbed wire incident, at least. So you see, I need your help, I tell him, to make sense of all this, to understand the rules. Joe, he says soberly. For example, why did I only stay a few seconds at the fair? That's enough, he says, placing his cup down. Why are you doing this to yourself? I know it's hard to believe, Mark, but it's real. Real? Let me tell you what I know for sure. I'm sorry, but it isn't my help you need. He stands and paces the room. Is this what you came all this way to tell me? I hold his gaze and my nerve. You told me once that you believed my viewings were given to me for a reason. Well, your psychometry is one thing, Mark counters, but this is completely different. No, I reply. I believe they're linked. Right. Mark folds his arms. You seriously expect me to believe this? I don't actually, which is why I'm going to prove it to you. Amy died, Joe, Mark says, a long time ago. Maybe that's true, but I think I can save her. Listen to me, he says. If you carry on like this, you're going to end up like your dad. The air freezes between us. 1,000 possible replies clambering at my throat. Mark sits down again. Yet another problem you haven't dealt with. You need therapy, Joe. You need to face the truth, accept what's lost and move on. But what if I can prove it to you, I say, more firmly this time? What then? He smiles. Prove that you can time travel. I nod and he points to a fedora hanging on a row of hooks. If you can prove it beyond any reasonable doubt, I will eat my hat. I grin. Then I hope you're hungry.
That was great.
So yeah, that, like I said, that's a little scene in the book. So, Joe has to do a fair bit of this, kind of try and figure out what the rules are and what's happening to him and how he can try and manipulate that. So I think in life, part of the story really is a man who starts the book very closed off, but there's a bit of a Beatles theme that runs through it, and he sort of gets by with a little help from his friends kind of idea. I think you have to include people and ask for help if you need it. So that's definitely another theme in the book.
So thank you very much, Nick Jones. We've enjoyed learning about And Then She Vanished and look forward to more great works from you in the future. And Then She Vanished is published by Blackstone Audio and is available now. We have books with signed book plates and patches by Nick Jones, but only while supplies last. So again, thank you very much for doing this with us and spending time today with us. Yes.
Yeah, no problem. It's my pleasure. I really enjoyed it. And again, if anybody wants to hear about new releases and opportunities for other things and bits and bobs, they can check out my website as well, which is nickjonesauthor.com. Signing up, you can sign up for my mailing list there as well.